The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Karen Cho with Steve Sedgwick live from Ankara, Turkey at the NATO summit. These are your headlines. The US hits Iran with fresh airstrikes and revokes its license to sell oil over its attacks on tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran responding with its own strikes on American military targets in Bahrain and Kuwait.
Well, President Trump arriving here in Ankara at the NATO summit, another pivotal summit, but yet again hammering European allies with threats once again over Greenland and threatening potentially to pull all troops out of Europe.
That's what hurt my relationship with NATO, because Greenland doesn't help Denmark. Denmark doesn't spend money to really help Greenland, but it's an important part for the United States. We don't have to spend any money. We could remove all of our soldiers out of Europe.
And yet the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte telling me that the Trump pressure on alliance members has delivered a very big win.
Europe is one big platform of power projection for the United States. That's happening. And when it comes to the money and the spending, Europe now equalizing with the United States. It is this president who encouraged us to do this. This is a big win for the American president. He has been extremely successful.
European leaders also telling Steve they firmly agree with raising spending commitments as the war in Iran leaves the alliance on high alert and Ukraine seeks a turning point in the conflict with Russia.
Hague was historic because it set the 5% target, and Ankara will be historic because we're proving that we can actually implement it.
We want to see the end of this war, and the only way to do it is actually pressure Russia so that they would genuinely negotiate with Ukraine.
So at this hour we have live events on the ground. The Hungarian Prime Minister is currently speaking, so let's listen in.
Victim, and Russia is the brutal aggressor, and Ukraine has the right to defend its territorial integrity. We maintain our humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, but as I have said many times before, Hungary will not provide arms or troops to Ukraine. Yesterday I had the opportunity for a short discussion with President Zelensky, and we agreed to meet bilaterally in the near future. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you. Bye.
Change of attitude from Hungary now Mr. Orban has gone. Well, I'll take that as a small win. I mean, there's been some bigger ones, but look, that was Peter Magyar, and what a fascinating person. Why? Because who has been the stick in the mud for the EU cohesion over the last couple of years? It's got to have been Viktor Orban, hasn't it? And of course, Peter Magyar, despite everything, had a quite stunning victory in the most recent prime ministerial elections, and he managed to, of course, beat Mr. Orban and perhaps bring Hungary back into Europe, perhaps create a little bit more cohesion for Europe as well. This is the Estonian Prime Minister. I think we should listen in. This is listening to Kristen Michael.
The first one is that allies should increase the defense expenditure. For example, Estonia invests in defense almost 7% this year. So this is also the expectations to our allies that to increase the capabilities and defense expenditure as already promised in Hague. Second is that NATO needs strong forward defense against Russia. Russia is a credible and acute threat to everybody, and strong forward posture, strong defense, different countries stands up against it. And also We need to increase our capabilities in defense industry because we're still lagging behind compared to other countries. And the third one is that we should take concrete goals, mention them, and take concrete goals in helping of Ukraine. Because for us and for Europe, for NATO, Ukraine is fighting for us the rule-based world and the freedom. The blood is spilled for us also. Estonia has taken the commitment to help Ukraine by 0.25% per year, but last year it was already 0.35% because we always add more because we can do more. So I expect this summit also to mention this and take concrete goals. So thank you, and I hope this will be an excellent summit.
Prime Minister, do you fear that actually the US wouldn't be there for Estonia despite all the efforts you're making? And could you just tell us a little bit about the threats you are facing on a regular basis from Russia?
Every prime minister has his tenure and his time. Mine has been pretty much involved in different security incidents with Russia because when we decoupled, desynchronized our energy grids from Russia, the Baltic energy grids, and synchronized ourselves with Central Europe, then at that moment we needed NATO's help on the sea because Russia's shadow fleet was hitting our subsea cables between Estonia and Finland and so on. So I called Secretary General Mark Rutte, so did Alex Stubb from Finland, and our military guys interacted. And right now, as we are here, speaking here, we have NATO operation ongoing, or vigilance activity ongoing in the Baltic Sea. That was one. Second one was when the MiGs, Russian fighter jets, entered Estonian airspace. And that moment, NATO's air policing went up. Italian F-35s, the most modern they are, went up and diverted and escorted Russian planes out. And we have had different incidents. For example, air policing from Romania shot down one drone on Estonian territory and so on. So, if you're asking, is NATO working, and if I'm confident that NATO is working, I'm absolutely confident, because on the military level, I'm from the practical side. I'm not talking what if, because I know NATO is working. We have operations on the sea, we have air policing, which will be changed to air defense this summit. So I'm quite assured that America will be there. And President Trump has said quite robustly also with the Russian incidents that when asked, he will protect Baltics and Poland. So this is very important message also for us and also to Russia. Thank you.
Well, there you go, the Estonian Prime Minister right on the front line of the eastern flank, taking one question here at NATO and one question to CNBC. That was it. Now look, what was really fascinating is that he says he thinks the US will be there for him. And it was a similar question to what I was speaking to with the Polish president, who also only took one question in English, and that was to CNBC. Listen to my question and answer with the president of Poland.
It's always possible that Vladimir Putin will use military corps of Russian Federation against countries from East Central Europe. We try to solidify not only in NATO but also in Poland to build a strong Polish military service, and we are here to solidify each other and recognize the main threat of Russian Federation. Of course, President Trump is a great friend of Republic of Poland, a great friend of Poland. We have almost 10,000 American soldiers in Poland. We would like to set the permanent camp permanent camp for American soldiers in Poland, and I'm sure that American soldiers in Poland will stay, and together with Polish soldiers will secure the Central East Europe and the borders of NATO.
Norway, Macedonia.
All right, President Lavrocky, who of course we spoke extensively with in Davos, taking a question very kindly in English for CNBC. Now look, I've been to a lot of these, as you know, and very often certain leaders, they just walk straight through. I mean, like Mr. Sanchez last year, just walked straight through because he didn't want to take the questions about not coming up with the 5% level. Another leader who doesn't stop normally is Mette Frederiksen. She's the Danish Prime Minister, of course, and my goodness me, if there's a nation that is in the eye of the storm at the moment, it is Denmark. And once again, President Trump raising the concerns about Greenland, which is, of course, that independent territory, part of Greenland, a part of Denmark as well. So look, Mette Frederiksen again took a question from CNBC about Is she concerned about defending the island, defending Greenland, having to defend it against the United States, against all foes? Listening to Mette Fredriksen's answer to CNBC.
We are ready to defend every inch of NATO, including our own territory. But one of the reasons why we have built NATO many years ago is if anything happens to one of us, then everybody should stand up for each other. I mean, Article 5 is our insurance. It goes for the eastern flank right now with the hybrid war coming in from Russia. It goes for US when they were attacked 9/11. And the same goes for Greenland if anything happens in our direction.
Against any party, whether it's a foe or whether it's an erstwhile friend, you will defend every inch of Greenland.
Of course we will defend the Kingdom of Denmark.
All right, I just want to tell you, I've got the Macedonia leader behind me. I'm going to just stick with the tape that we've accomplished and got so far, because I think we had some really interesting comments as well. Not least comments from the NATO Secretary General, who of course spoke to me on the first day of this conference, but also answered my question about, despite all his best efforts, does he feel that the President has perhaps scuppered the agenda and ignored those spending commitments that Mark Rutte has been talking about so vociferously with? Let's listen in to Mark Rutte.
We know that there is disappointment on the American side when it comes to Iran, and it has to do with isolated cases. At the same time, we see up to 5,000 sorties from European bases. It's implementing all the bilateral basing agreements. It is again, Europe as one big platform of power projection for the United States. That's happening. And when it comes to the money and the spending, I mean, Europe now equalizing with the United States. It is this president who encouraged us to do this very forcefully. Of course, there is also the Russian threat, which forces us to do this on the European side of NATO. And I think this is a big win for the American president. He has been extremely successful, pushing for this since Trump 45, now achieving it in Trump 47.
Keep it on track, keep it on track. That's what Mark Rutte is trying to do here. Of course, despite the brickbats and the curveballs being thrown by the US President. Karen, I know we need to take a break. We need to pay for our bills as well. Let me hand it back to you.
Steve, I think we're going to just stay on air for a little bit longer. There's so much happening. So let me just ask you a quick question about Iran, because we've been talking a lot about Ukraine. Europeans clearly closely watching the eastern flank, concerned about this ongoing war with Russia and whether there's any stepped up capabilities from here. But the reality is we're still talking about a non-peaceful process around Iran. What is the buzz there from NATO about whether this conflict in the Middle East is actually progressing to some sort of very peaceful outcome?
Yeah, here's a question, Karen, which I haven't heard asked anywhere. Do we think the timing of the Iranian action and the timing of the US action back at Iran, do we think that's a coincidence, the fact that all these world leaders are in Ankara? I'm not entirely sure it is. I wonder if, dare I say it, the very smart Iranians have been antagonistic to the US, got the response they wanted from the US, and perhaps grabbed the headlines from this conference as well, because it is a headline which is perhaps the one that the Europeans don't want to hear about. It's because it's one of the areas where the US feels it has a very large bone of contention with the European allies, and the fact that they weren't there for them in epic fury, apparently. They didn't allow all air bases to be used. So it's a very contentious issue here, and of course that, along with Greenland, are two of the curveballs that are being thrown at Mark Rutte and others' way. I spoke to Kai Kallas about this very issue yesterday, about the Strait of Hormuz and freedom of waterways, and it seems very clear that Europeans' top foreign policy official agrees actually on this issue, although there have been discontent with other points with national governments, and that is that Europe will not get involved in epic fury, but Europe will be part of the freedom of navigation. She and I have actually both spent a bit of time this year in Singapore, and we both referenced the Strait of Malacca, and if you have other key global waterways which have tolls on them, which have conflict in those waterways, then that is terrible for world trade. So this isn't just about Strait of Hormuz, it's about Straits of Malacca, it's about all freedom of navigation on a worldwide basis. But again, I think it's a very interesting timing from the Iranians and the US as well to put that issue back on the table here when Mark Rutte and others have so many issues they want to talk about apart from that.
Steve, we are going to squeeze in a quick break. I know more leaders are arriving at the moment on that blue carpet, so we'll come back out to you ahead. We're going to have much more from the NATO summit in Ankara as the defence spending debate takes centre stage and leaders give their backing to fresh US strikes in Iran. Plus, populist right figureheads come under scrutiny for their finances on both sides of the channel. The latest there, and we'll be speaking to the head of merger market as M&A volumes rise to record levels in the first half of the year.
Executive Decisions is the new podcast from CNBC where I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything. I'm Steve Sedgwick. Here's the CEO of the London Stock Exchange Group, Julia Hoggett.
There is no justification whatsoever for not doing the right thing, even if the right thing is hard to do. Which also means that if the context changes or the information changes, it is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
That's Executive Decisions with me, Steve Sedgwick. Get it wherever you're listening to this.
Let me take you to US markets for a look at the action we saw yesterday. Semiconductor sell-off that started across in the Asian markets from Samsung. And despite beating on expectations around profits, the market still saw some triggers there. Carried across to the European markets, we saw chips here in the European market selling off, and Wall Street picked up on that action yesterday. On top of that, the layer around the geopolitics as we again watch the exchange of live fire in the Middle East. So the Dow, despite hitting a fresh record intraday, also peeled back from the higher range, down 0.25%, selling on the S&P 500, but ramped up selling on the Nasdaq thanks to that semiconductor story, down well over 1%. To what we're seeing across on the Asian markets today and how they picked up on some of that action stateside again. The Japanese stock market is down heavily. We've got the South Korean market. Again, this is a reset, and we've been talking to a lot of fund managers that there could be a little bit of a selling of some of those crowded positions in semiconductors at this stage, even if the picture around the fundamentals longer term looks compelling. So it seems like we're watching that playing out on a daily basis. The other markets, Shanghai, Hong Kong, are in the green, and significantly so for Hong Kong stocks, 3.25%. To what we're now seeing on the European markets as we gear up for the start of trade, we reversed yesterday, second negative session in a row, roughly 0.6 plus came off the Stock 600. We are watching 50 futures this morning indicated down across on FTSE futures here in the UK, also a drift anticipated, despite again watching those oil prices and what the geopolitics and the live exchange of fire again means for the oil sector. The DAX down by 1/3%, and yesterday it was down about 1.4%, breaking a 5-day winning streak, so just coming off some of those record highs. US futures early on, the picture stateside, it's one that looks a little bit soft, so some soggy action looks tentative at this hour. Global M&A volume surged to a record level in the first 6 months of 2026, according to Merger Market, jumping 44% on the year. Lucinda Guthrie joins us, head of Merger Market. Lucinda, it felt like we were talking about deals all the time, but you've been crunching the numbers and also in the front row of all this deal activity. So just explain what you saw.
So it's incredibly interesting to me that this year we've seen a shift from, we're always talking about mega deals, now we're thinking about giga deals, the 50 billion plus transactions. We had 6 of those this year, which is a record. And a lot of it is linked to that AI infrastructure and these huge bets that we've been talking about, where you've got some cash-rich corporates and they're looking at making a large strategic play that will take out a number of these strategic priorities, whether it's AI, whether it's looking at the future of their business or innovation. And that's been driving a lot of the activity up to now.
So by numbers, you had mega deals valued at $10 billion or more, reaching a record of $1.32 trillion across 48 transactions. That is significant, but is it possible that that continues into the second half? Is there any history that tells us when the first half starts strong with these types of transactions, it's a playbook for the second half?
Well, I think what's interesting for me is obviously we've got the midterms coming up. There has been this surge of activity, and we've been wondering how long can it last. Now, you were just talking about the difficult markets this morning, and one of the things that we've got our eye closely on is whether there could be a correction in the markets, because a lot of this activity is at the top end of the market. The mid-market and small cap is more subdued. If you think about what happens if there is a correction at the top end, suddenly do those transactions continue, because some of them have had a share component? Does that in turn, would that mean that valuations in the mid-cap actually start to come down to a level where they can transact?
I'm curious about how you see a market correction playing out and what you've been hearing from your conversations, because we're obviously discussing it here and the triggers seem to be, look, you've seen the escalation in some of the AI activity and maybe those frothy valuations, semiconductors, maybe they reset. If it's the interest rate story from the central bank, which again, I mean, that keeps moving on a daily basis and we're looking at the minutes now to see just how hawkish the Fed is. But what would be the trigger from what you're hearing?
Well, all of those are are considerations we're watching. For me, the biggest thing is around the cost of AI and whether there is a return on capital, and whether indeed the hyperscalers can find a way to benefit from the cost, because that is a big unknown. And people say, well, in order for that to happen, individuals like you and I would need to have the equivalent of 3 different mobile phones from 3 different providers to make that cost of capital have significant returns. So how that plays out is something we're watching very carefully, and that could have a significant impact on the market.
But there's so many variables. I mean, we've gone from talking about token maxing to some tokens being given away for free so market share can be achieved, to trying to reduce the overall level of compute using energy efficiency and other measures and different ways of running models. I mean, there's so many moving pieces here. But I want to also push on to what we're seeing under the hood, away from those mega transactions, because to me it feels as though a lot of the players in the industry know that this is a very unusual market. If anyone's raising, they're trying to raise now. They're trying to front load it because they are concerned about something around the corner. Is that the sort of instinct that you're seeing from a lot of players in the industry?
100%. I think there's a lot of eyes on the antitrust situation, on the regulatory framework, because that is something that has been seen as a substantial accelerator for transactions. Is this administration in the US has a antitrust approach that has been that has seen a number of transactions go through that would not have been allowed in previous administrations. Now, any shift in that, for example, any shift in that going forward could impact appetite. I think one thing that we're looking at is whether companies are actually accelerating transactions now so that they can get ahead of any potential shift in regulatory approach in the US.
And it's not just the Americans, the Chinese too. I mean, this morning I was just reminded that Meta is having done that $2 billion acquisition of the Chinese startup Manus. Authorities of China looking at whether some of the investment into the space should be constrained, that they're more picky about who is going to be allowed into the ecosystem. I mean, that does tell you that the borders still exist between Chinese and American tech, even at the early stage level.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a huge issue, the kind of race for AI dominance between China and the US. Do you know something we shouldn't forget as well is the UK? I think that people have suddenly realised with the public interest, the prospect of public interest being raised in some of the recent transactions in the UK, that could actually chill some of the activity in the UK as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. Lucinda, thank you so much for joining us, and great to hear the wash up from the first half. Lucinda Guthrie, Head of Merger Market.